Let's maybe talk a little bit about what insulin resistance is. We'll get into what causes it, but let's just maybe define for people this term that gets thrown around constantly,
Yep.
and let's explain what it is from a technical standpoint.
Yeah. So basically, every time you eat a meal and your blood sugar level goes up, you're going to release insulin. And insulin is sort of a master regulator for all biochemical processes in the body. So one of the things that insulin is going to do is going to talk to your muscles. They're going to say, take up glucose and burn that glucose. So what we need to know is, in a normal person, when I infuse insulin, how much of the glucose is taken up by the muscle. And then we could look at someone who is, say, overweight, or we could look at someone who's diabetic. And I actually developed the gold standard technique, which is the insulin clamp technique, to look at this. So we could take an obese person or a diabetic or a normal person, we raise the insulin, and then I'm using muscle as an example, how much glucose is taken up disposed of by the muscle. And then I can compare if you're overweight compared to the lean person. Well, obese people are very insulin resistant in terms of muscle glucose uptake. I could look at the diabetic. They're even more insulin resistant. But there are many processes that insulin control. So insulin regulates how much fat is released from your fat cells. And obese people, unfortunately, insulin keeps the fat in your fat cell. But in obese people, insulin doesn't work so well. So instead of keeping the fat in the fat cell, even though your insulin is high, you're breaking down the fat. So you have to look at each individual process that insulin is controlling. And so for that process, we know this is what a normal person should respond like. This is what a diabetic responds like, and the diabetic is much, much more insulin resistant. They're not responding. So it's, in a certain way, it's a general term because insulin controls so many things. Protein metabolism. Insulin is very important in helping you to build protein. So I could infuse insulin, and we've done this using carbon-labeled leucine, and we can define how insulin promotes protein metabolism in a normal, healthy person. And then I could do the same kind of study in an obese person, and we know that the obese people don't respond to the insulin as well in terms of aggregating protein metabolism. So it's kind of a general term.
And does that translate not just to structural proteins such as enzymes or cellular structural proteins, but also macro structural proteins such as muscle?
Absolutely. So I can look at specific enzymes within the cell. I can look at certain genes within the cell that are turned on or off, or I can look at muscle in terms of muscle as a bulk. So there are many, as I said, many ways in which you could define insulin resistance, but basically whatever the particular process you're looking at, you're comparing what would be the normal response in a normal healthy person compared to what might happen in a diabetic person or an obese individual.
So one of the challenges with the term insulin resistance is, as you said, it's a vague term and it's non-specific because the actions of insulin are so many.
Yes.
It has an action in the liver, it has an action in the muscles, it has an action with response to glucose, it has an action with response to amino acids, and it has an action with response to fat, both in the liberation of fat, lipolysis, and presumably in response to oxidation.
Absolutely.